A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "To you who hear, I say, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. To the person who strikes you on one cheek, offer the other one as well, and from the person who takes your cloak, do not withhold even your tunic. Give to everyone who asks of you, and from the one who takes what is yours, do not demand it back. Do to others as you would have them do to you. For if you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? Even sinners do the same. If you lend money to those from whom you expect repayment, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners and get back the same amount. But rather love your enemies and do good to them and lend expecting nothing back. Then your reward will be great, and you will be the children of the Most High, for he himself is kind to the ungrateful and the wicked. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Stop judging, and you will not be judged. Stop condemning, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and gifts will be given to you. A good measure, packed together, shaken down, and overflowing will be poured into your lap. For the measure with which you measure will return, in return be measured out to you." The Gospel of the Lord. What you measure out will be measured back to you, so love your enemies. If this world was mine, I'd take your dreams and make them multiply. If this world was mine, I'd take your enemies in front of God, introduce them to that light, hit them strictly with that fire. It's a vibe, do your dance, let them watch. She a fan, he a flop, just wanna kumbaya, nah. Well, these are the lyrics of Kendrick Lamar Duckworth and Solana Imani Rowe, otherwise known as SZA. It's the number 2 song in the country this week, at least on the charts. It's a song called Luther, and it was, of course, performed by both of these artists as a collaboration as part of our Super Bowl halftime show a few weeks ago. Well, if this world were mine is the repeated line in there, and that, of course, is an homage to an older song from the early 80s. It was covered by Luther Vandross and Cheryl Lynn, a great R&B song with a nice soulfulness for what they used to call the velvet voice of Luther Vandross. And so that's why the song is called Luther. Kendrick Lamar wanted to pay that tribute and to continue that collaboration. He and SZA, of course, cueing from a song that was a collaboration between Luther Vandross and Cheryl Lynn. The song originally was written by Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell. So there's this interesting pattern of collaboration and emulation. Different artists, male and female, covered by another male and female duo, of course, done in our modern time and interpreted to an extent in a new way. There's something I do admire about that attempt at collaboration and that way of showing we can work together, especially when it's something like dealing with difficult stuff like our enemies. I do appreciate Lamar's line that I'll take your enemies in front of God, and it not to punish them, but to let that light hit them and let it be seen, and you can be yourself, put yourself forward, do your dance, and then maybe we'll reach some moment where we can come to a new place. Now, I don't know that Kendrick Lamar is a good example of how to deal with those you don't like. I don't know. You can decide for yourself. He certainly has his famous battles with people he's in dispute with. But I think for ourselves, if we take this gospel serious today, this seriousness of what Jesus is saying here sounds a little extreme. He's saying, look, you got to take people that you don't like, who may be your enemies, and you've got to really seriously figure out how they and their conflict isn't going to control or define you. I think that's what he's really saying here. And I think we know that if we're going to exercise leadership, if we're going to live our lives with integrity, And if we're going to also have some peace in ourselves, we can't let our conflicts dominate us. We can't let them degrade into resentments that just eat away at us. Because to be frank, that doesn't do anybody any good, but most especially, it's almost like it's self-inflicted suffering on ourselves. We need to take seriously the fact that we do have conflicts. And believe me, I'm not naive about our conflicts. I'm not somebody who believes in peace at all costs and resolving our conflicts. No, not at all. In fact, I'm somebody who believes that if you come to a settlement, but the same injustice or oppression it continues to occur, well, then it's no settlement at all. It's a false peace. It would be, in fact, maybe even a disturbing or harmful tolerance. No. I'm into just solutions and establishing a just peace, which means we got to get back to a right relationship, and that takes work. But it's not going to accomplish that work if we end up just stoking up the conflict. Simple-minded people, incompetent leaders, they do that. They do that in order to play their audiences. I'll stoke up a conflict, I'll create a lot of chaos, and you'll think I'm needed or competent, and I'll step into the midst of the chaos I created. It's a false crisis. It's not even a real crisis because of how truncated it all is, so to speak. But you and I should be better than that because we read this gospel and because we understand that there's a way in which we need to know that we're people who are called to a new recipe, as Jesus kind of outlines in the end of his gospel here, where he says to his followers, you need to take people that you consider your enemies or people you have conflicts with, and you need to really figure out for yourself how you want to have an attitude that's constructive between you and them, regardless of what you may think of them, regardless of the harm that's been caused. You still need to figure out how we can work with this. There's great examples of this, I think, in our world of people who can and do work that out because they get to a point of acknowledging each other's humanity. And once we do that, then we can figure out how to get past what are really superficial and misguided senses of self in the midst of serious conflict. And so I think we need to work on that, because if we stick there with the conflict and we let it degrade into resentment, again, like I said, it's pretty self-destructive. And in fact, it's not going to be helpful at dealing with your enemy and, in fact, arriving at a just solution, at a resolution, at a real peace. My students this week are collaborating with each other and looking at the exhortation of Pope Francis at the very beginning of his papacy called Evangelium Gaudium. And there he talks in that address, which is a map out for his papacy. I've been thinking a lot about it given his recent sickness and what seems to be the end of his papacy. In Evangelium Gaudium, though, he says, an injustice will give rise to a violence of one form or another. So his emphasis there is grounding ourselves in a common values like goodness and truth and beauty. And if we can seek that together, we can arrive at a new place, even if we don't perfectly agree with each other. There's a way in which Pope Francis has often said, may we make God's merciful love the more evident in our world through dialogue, through mutual acceptance, and through fraternal cooperation. Well, that's something I think we need to do. Beauty, truth, and goodness in our common sharing and striving for that in some way, because everybody wants that, can then allow us to empower us to practice love. And that, my friends, may then get us to that place where we can have an authentic collaboration that uses our different gifts, that allows us to harmonize a little bit and move forward with a new creation. Much like that old song, If This World Were Mine, were originally done by the Marvin Gaye, Tammy Terrell collaboration, covered by Luther Vandross and Cheryl Lynn, and now brought into a whole new kind of song with a whole new emphasis for a new time by Kendrick Lamar and SZA. Maybe you and I can look around at the folks that we find unlikely collaborators and see if we can find a little common harmony and be able to say, you know what, we don't need to be enemies, We don't need to agree with each other on everything. We may not even particularly like certain aspects of how we go about things. But the fact of the matter is, we don't have to end up in a place that's self-destructive, but instead a collaboration that's constructive, and be able to work with those we may have thought as enemies, as Jesus suggests in today's gospel. Amen.